Test. Okay. Hey everyone, I'm Josh Whiton with MakeSoil.org. I'm going to kind of skip the bio, but short of it is I used to be a tech entrepreneur. I've always done stuff that helps make the planet better, but now I am full in on what I call planetary interventions. I don't think there's any time for companies that don't make the world a better place at this point, and I don't even call them companies anymore. I call them planetary interventions because I think the state of the world is actually that serious. Staying with that serious theme, let's talk just for a moment about the state of the planet. We've got some serious nutrient loss going on, right? Very simply, the amount of food that we're asking fields to produce constantly. You know, how many grocery stores do you have in your city? There's like 10 grocery stores and they're all full of fresh food all the time. We're asking the ground to produce all that stuff all the time. Very little nutrients are ever going back to that farmland. So I don't like to say, but I do say that technically the food that you get at a normal grocery store is less nutritious every week you go there. We have a topsoil loss problem. The UN says that there's only about 60 years of farming left before the entire system collapses. The amount of topsoil degradation has been so great. We have extinction, biodiversity, loss. You know, this blue dot here, this is essentially an ecosystem. It depends on that biodiversity. Even though we don't know what a lot of the critters do on Earth, they all do something. We don't want to find out the hard way what they were doing. So major loss of extinction of biodiversity, major causes, habitat loss from farming, and now ocean acidification. So this whole climate change thing, you know, the oceans are 25% more acidic than they were before the Industrial Revolution. We don't know what that's going to do, but probably not great things. We've got a pollution problem. We've got these plastic bags. There's sea turtles. I rode with a Coast Guard official the other day who said it's so sad to see sea turtles who can't dive anymore because their bellies are full of plastic bags and they just starve to death. We've got a climate issue, of course. We have a bunch of CO2 in the atmosphere, and even worse than that, we have methane in the atmosphere, which is even more insulatory a greenhouse gas than CO2. And we have an economy problem. The entire economy right now is about 99.9% something that uses the environment in an extractive way as a raw material and doesn't think of it as a living ecosystem. That's a problem. So almost the entire economy was shaped out of that paradigm, which is now outdated. And you make mistakes with that paradigm times 8 billion people, and they start to show up really quickly, which is where we're at now. So Mars is very exciting these days. A lot of people are into Mars. Well, we better love Mars because right now we're on track to turn Earth into Mars faster than we are on track to turn Mars into Earth. Doing something with Mars means becoming masters of ecosystems. We're not masters of ecosystems. We don't even know how to take care of one that's already in full swing, let alone stimulate one that doesn't exist. But that's where the direness and the negativity stops, because I think we've all been bombarded with these messages already many, many times. And at the end of the documentary, whatever, they say, well, ride your bike to work and take the bus and take your bag to the grocery store. And you're like, that's it? That's what I'm going to do to stop the tide of planetary disaster? And so I think our nervous systems are really kind of burned out on hearing all that bad news. I am here to tell you that there is one simple thing that we can all do, every single person has the ability to do, that is not some token do-good thing, but is an actual, impactful, significantly transformative do-good thing that almost none of the world is doing right now, which means we have an opportunity to actually turn this thing around and to keep our blue dot looking like that. So, what is the one thing that we could all be doing that significantly impacts everything I just mentioned and even more terrible things that I didn't get into? That is to make soil. I mean literally to make soil, dirt, compost, whatever you want to call it. Every single person generates food waste, therefore every single person can contribute to creating this stuff. Now, a lot of people are unfamiliar with it, so what's the deal? Compost or new soil is essentially made out of this stuff. At this kind of conference, people eat a lot of real food here. That's awesome, which means probably within a couple days, you and your family, whether you're saving it up or not, you've generated a bunch of this stuff. A bunch of, let me see if I can remember there. Those are papaya seeds, eggshells, celery, lemon, lime. There's even like a dirty napkin in there. All that stuff can be turned back into jet black, nourishing soil. Those are the nutrients that are being lost in our food system right now. They're going to landfills where they rot and turn into methane. The methane just makes climate change worse. And the nutrients are taken out of the food system for thousands of years. It's dumb. So it's like, if we all want to get behind something that doesn't have any downsides to it, doesn't need to be political, doesn't need to be vegan versus whatever, it's that this stuff should never go to the landfill anymore. Right now, over 95% of it goes to the landfill. Almost all of it worldwide goes to the landfill. 1.6 billion tons of food waste alone, and that doesn't even count all the non-food waste, all the carbon that plants are pulling out of the air. So we have about, you probably heard the statistic, about 50% of the food that's produced gets thrown away anyway, never makes it to the actual consumer for consumption. That's super hard on the planet. And again, most of it goes to landfills where it causes super bad problems. Then we got issues like this. This is an orchard next to a high school near where I live. I don't know what the high schoolers are learning, but they're not learning that apples are food. And furthermore, nobody here realizes that all of these can be turned back into soil. Like this represents these, and there's actually a whole field of these. So there's like, I'm watching, and they're delicious apples. I'm watching tens of thousands of apples and pears rotting on the ground, turning into methane, turning into CO2. You know, the UN talks about CO2 and greenhouse gases as if it's some kind of phantasm that we need like Superman to solve or something. No, the plants are solving it all the time. All of this stuff is made out of the carbon from the atmosphere. The plant is pulling it out of the air molecule by molecule, and it's us humans who don't realize the opportunity to lock all that carbon and nitrogen back into the ground. I took some time off of work in my tech job to learn about composting. I learned that you could make soil out of anything. Here's banana peels, eggshells, some cilantro, some bank statements, some egg cartons, and some blue jeans. And all of it disappeared within about 90 days and turned into this jet black, nourishing soil. I do workshops all over where we teach people how to make soil. I was just in Florida. We were wandering around a property doing a workshop, not pre-orchestrated in any way. We found thousands of rotting oranges on the ground. There's a bunch of really fallow orange groves in Florida because of the blight that they had a few years ago. We found these things. There's some kind of walnut thing that broke every nutcracker we tried to crack open with it. These things are like from a magnolia tree. We've all seen those before. That's carbon, folks. This is the mythical carbon that the United Nations is looking for. Here in this palm frond, what you're seeing there is the carbon after a lot of the nitrogen is left from the chlorophyll and gone back into the air. So this is the carbon we're looking for. Leaves, peat moss. When we were doing the workshop, a lady came by and said, "What are you doing with those leaves?" And we said, "We're making soil." And she said, "I just burned all my leaves." So we're talking about something very simple that very few humans actually understand or know about in today's society. That you need this stuff to balance the nitrogen to make soil. And so you mix it all together in the right ratio, in the right conditions. It's a recipe that we can teach anyone, and it turns back into this stuff. Carbon from the air locked into the ground, full of nutrients. So when I say that making soil together can reverse and fix all of those terrible problems I mentioned, I absolutely mean it. It's not hyperbolic. But what I didn't mention is it takes just about all of us doing it. Doesn't matter if a few thousand people do it and then 7 billion people don't do it. We need making soil together to become as common as making garbage and trash together. So let me show you that this is possible. Let me show you what this actually looks like. Meet Jen. Jen is a yoga teacher and meditation teacher, and every single week she holds soil making workshops at her house in her backyard. People learn, she makes soil in these big giant hoops. The neighbors bring their food scraps. So she's receiving the food scraps from about 20 people on her street. And then weekly people are coming to learn how to make soil from her. Meet Ray. Ray is making soil in the backyard of a church that he doesn't even attend. He's receiving food scraps from the neighborhood, and he also stops at the local smoothie shop, which is continually throwing away stuff like this. If Ray doesn't stop and get it, I mean, you could just frankly eat that. That's just been in a juice presser once. If Ray doesn't stop and pick this up, it goes to the landfill and turns into methane and becomes part of the climate change problem. If Ray picks this up, all this stuff goes back into our food system. Look at all that shredded carrots and stuff like that. You know what this is? Somebody knows? Coffee grounds. Hundreds of pounds of coffee grounds every week. Most coffee grounds in America go to landfills every day. That's insanity. This stuff has come from the other side of the planet. There's jungle nutrients in that stuff. You want that in the food system here. You don't want that going to a landfill. That's crazy. So Ray picks up all of this stuff every week, and he turns it into this beautiful soil. This is what it means to put nutrients back in the food system. This is what it means to capture carbon. This is what it means to personally take action to help reverse climate change. Meet Tracy. Tracy runs this soil site, as we call it in the MakeSoil land, in a park. She's gotten permission from the city to put these 7 or so compost bins here, and her site is registered on the MakeSoil app that we'll talk about soon. 54 households bring their food scraps to these bins that Tracy manages. She is a champion soil maker, and she manages 3 of these sites. This is just a citizen. This isn't the government. This isn't the UN. This is a person who learned how to make soil. And 54 households at this soil site alone. Here's another friend. She has a house like any of us have, a nice house, and admit it, most people's houses and backyards are boring. Nothing interesting happens there. But here, at her house, people come together every week to learn to make soil. They bring scraps. They all stop at a restaurant or a coffee shop, and they pick up scraps, and they bring them here, and they make soil together. This is a food bank where I did a workshop recently. Food banks end up with tons of spoiled produce. People give them the produce, the grocery stores give them the produce like the day before they go bad, or when they've already gone bad, the day after they've gone bad. Most of that produce doesn't get picked up by those in need and ends up going into a garbage dump. This food bank said enough is enough. They wanted to learn how to make soil. They built these bins. They brought me in. Kind of looks like we're the dirty dozen there, doesn't it? We've got a job to do, and we're going to learn how to make soil. So these people are upping their game. They're becoming soil makers. This is a guy who's very special to me. This is my dad. He's 70, and this is a bin that I built him. It took me a couple days to build it. Within 2 days of building this bin, he was now the soil maker for 11 people in his neighborhood. Gives him purpose, gives him a skill that the world needs, and this is the scene that he gets to witness now when he looks out of his back window. He gets to see the next generation walking up. He gets to see a family learning how to make soil. And what's significant about this, folks, is that this child is now experiencing a truly regenerative act. Most of us, most of the 8 billion people alive right now have never experienced a single regenerative act. We keep talking about a regenerative economy. There's no regenerative jobs. Nobody's having any regenerative experiences. We're never going to get there so long as we're scraping our food into the garbage 3 times a day. But we can take that experience and instead have this beautiful experience where the child will grow up witnessing the planet regenerate itself, and moreover, they will witness themselves participating in the regenerative process. We will not have a regenerative economy until people begin to start having regenerative experiences that they participate in. So we're not talking about the city just coming and picking this stuff up and taking it off to some other place. We've got to get out of the box and bin culture where we click a couple buttons on the internet, a package shows up, we play with it for a while, it breaks, the garbage man takes it away. That's got to end. We've got to break out of the box and bin culture and start connecting these feedback loops. Meet James. At the start of the year, January 2019, James didn't know anything about making soil. Frankly, he didn't know much about the planet. So he hung out with me for a few days, though, and I said, James, I want to build the ultimate compost bin that's going to help people make soil like crazy, like one bin, inexpensive, that can get 10, 20 people all making soil in it. He didn't know anything about making soil. I didn't know anything about woodworking, but we hung out for a few days, and we built what I consider to be the ultimate soil-making bin. And those plans are available on MakeSoil.org. We're putting them out there for free so that folks all over the world can start building these bins, so that woodworkers can start building these bins. James will tell you now, he used to be a cabinet maker, he'll tell you I'm a bin maker now. We just made that up, folks. That's a new regenerative job. We've made up 2 regenerative jobs now, the soil maker and the bin maker. That's all you got to do. You just believe it, you make it, and now we have new regenerative jobs. Simple as that. Don't look for them on the college curricula. We got to make them up ourselves. And now he's unleashing his creativity. James is creating some of the most beautiful compost bins ever created in history. Now, there are no excuses to get started with this. This is the first bin I ever built. It's just a couple pallets banged together with some chicken wire on front. I didn't even have a yard. This was in my apartment complex. I didn't even have permission to do this. I just figured I'm going to build this on Super Bowl Sunday while everybody's watching TV, and we're going to fill it up as quickly as possible so that it's a real pain in the ass to move. And that's exactly what happened. And I invited my neighbors. I went door to door and invited my neighbors to start bringing their scraps there because I sure didn't have enough food waste to start making enough soil. There's about a 20 times reduction in volume of the volume of food stuff we put in the soil we get out. So you need a lot of food scraps. Pay attention to this spot over here, this scraggly little nothing of a spot that there's hundreds of millions of these spots all over America, nothing going on there. We started making soil together and we wanted to grow stuff. So here you see we've got a bunch of leaves, we've got a bunch of soil being built here from the neighbors. We wanted to grow stuff, and that little scrap of nothing patch of dirt turned into this. Folks, there are, with 1.6 billion tons of food scraps going to landfills every year, if all of those food scraps were turned into soil, we would have enough new soil for several million new gardens every single year. So you can see why I'm passionate about this project. It's not just about the first order effects of putting the nutrients directly back in the soil. It's the second and third order effects. It's the change in the economy, the change in jobs that people start taking. It's the gardens they start growing. It's the experience of growing things that they've never had before. All of this happens when we tip over the first domino of beginning to make soil together. And everyone can participate because even if you don't want to learn how to make soil, you generate food scraps and there's somebody in your neighborhood who does, and they need your food scraps. So that's how, we can't all take a trip through the Amazon, we can't all visit a regenerative farm, but we can all do this. This is the opportunity that's awaiting every single member of the human race right now. And mark my words, it's going to happen. Now that we have the soil maker and the bin maker, what's going to happen is we are going to see a future of artisanal soil. So remember what happened to beer and chocolate and coffee? Like chocolate used to be like $1 and now you can smell like $8, and a beer used to be like 35 cents and now it can be like $6. It's because the artisanal spirit, you don't even want a 50-cent cup of coffee anymore. You're just like so suspicious of a 50-cent cup of coffee. You want to pay at least the good $3 for your coffee. And that's what's going to happen with soil next. We're just at a place where nobody values healthy soil right now, but I've seen it. People start making soil together and they start putting their scraps in there and they start saying, wait a minute, do you think there's chemicals on that banana peel? Yeah, there is. Now they're seeing that it's not going away. They start buying organic instead. They don't want the chemicals on there. So we're completing that feedback loop. People are going to start to care about healthy soil. People are going to start to make healthy soil in small batches and even sell it. That's, again, part of the regenerative economy. So again, I am not being hyperbolic when I say that we can absolutely reverse all of those greatest challenges facing us today because of the first, second, and third order effects of making soil together, but we all have to participate. So how do you get everybody to participate? There's enough talks that go on in the world where somebody says, if only we all did this, then, if only we were all enlightened, then yada yada. How do we actually get past that to actually this happening? So I'm behind a project called MakeSoil.org. It is essentially the operating system that unifies the human race into actually executing on this together. What that means is everybody you saw in those pictures, all the soil makers you saw, are on this online platform. Each dot represents one of them. People who are making soil, teaching how to make soil, and receiving food scraps from 2, 3, 4, or 20 of their neighbors. And it's beginning to spread worldwide. We've only been out for a few months, but this is how it works. You register a soil site, you get on there, people can find you, they can see who you are, they can see what you're doing, they can see why you're doing it, they can see how many people are participating, they can see what you accept, what they don't accept, clears up everything for everybody, and if you join the soil site, then you have a little command center here where you all participate in making soil together. Because maybe you work at a coffee shop, or maybe you have a bunch of leaves in your yard, or maybe you have a whole fridge of food that went bad because your refrigerator went out, but you collaborate here and you begin to farm carbon together, the carbon that the plants have already pulled out of the air. You are working together to lock that into the ground, because if you don't, it will go back up into the air. So, I know there's so many good causes, there's so many good things going on. I've been involved in many good causes over the years, but I'm telling you now that in a personal level, there's almost no more important thing that you can possibly do than if you have a compost bin to go home and say, my compost bin is more than just a little bin for myself. It is a soil site for me and my community. And you come here and you register your soil site so that people can start to work with you to make soil. If you don't have a compost bin and don't know what you're doing, then we need you to go to this site and find somebody near you who does. If every person said, on my watch, I will no longer allow the planet to be put into a trash can, then we're going to be on to something. So I want each person to start considering taking that vow that I do not allow the planet to go into the trash can when I'm responsible for having brought that food into the world. So find a soil maker near you, find a soil site near you. I'll leave some time for questions and answers, but you can see that people are feeling generally disempowered these days about the climate situation and whatnot, and it's so unnecessary. It's just because nobody has really, we have not en masse realized yet that we can capture the carbon, we can sequester the carbon, we can put the nutrients back in the food system. So this leaves us feeling empowered. We are actually doing something, not just feeling like we're doing something. So in closing, no more waiting for governments to solve this, no more waiting for science to solve this, no more waiting for some invention that doesn't exist today, no more wondering who's going to do it, or how we're going to do it, or what we're even going to do. Let's just make soil together. Thank you very much.